welcome to another Exos Hero Spotlight. And today we'll be taking a look at Valarr, the second of the 5 greatest generals of Sing West. Overall, Valarr has the potential to be a tanky, high damage, mana generating debuffer. But that's only when he is partnered with Garth. The rest of the time he's still solid, but lacks the utility that really sets the best apart unless you have his Fate Core. So with that being said, let's take a quick look at who Valarr is. So he's a fated hero with a nature element, defense position, so he's got to be in the front row, and his attack type is physical attack. With that being said, let's take a look at his skill set and what he brings to the table.
Right, so Valarr, as is with every other hero, has a basic attack. His does between 431 to 517 damage to a single target. His A1 is Demon Slash, which is a back row first ability, dealing 210% damage to all back row enemies. Now, this will also proc Executioner if the target does not die due to his passive, and we'll get to that later. His A2 is General's Authority, which is a single target ability that deals 750% damage to one enemy. And let's watch this play out here, because this skill, the animation, is just incredible. I love watching this. Oh, that's just... it's so brutal. So his passive, he starts out with Thrust 3, which is deal 30% damage and stuns the attacker for 5 turns upon taking damage when hit. Additionally, he can gain 1 mana if the target's HP is 80% or higher, and he reduces 1 mana from the target and gains 1 mana for himself if the target's HP is 30% or lower. The other 2 parts of his passive, Executioner, grants additional effects if you receive a command depending on the state of the target that was struck by the skill. This is a little bit confusing. We'll talk about that later in the discussion. Impact means all other targets with the Executioner mark lose 20% of their attack if a target marked with Executioner dies. So with that having been said, let's move on to the discussion and see what this all really means.
Yeah, so there's a lot going on here with Valarr, but I think just by looking at the skills, we can realize that it is really revolving around his Executioner passive. And we'll analyze that a little bit. One of the things that we really need to point out is that Valarr and his Executioner passive really depends on the synergy with Garth and his passive, which is Command. Without Garth, Valarr's Executioner passive essentially will not work. The way I see Valarr being utilized is looking at the order of his skills and what they do and how they can proc his passive. So first, his A1 hits the backline, which probably won't be one-shotting any of the targets. That means all of the backline enemies will be marked with Executioner. And then his A2, which does significantly more damage to a single target, can be used to execute one of the marked backline heroes, which will proc the Executioner mark. Also, utilizing Valarr's passive, it makes him a very effective mana battery for his team as well. And at the same time, it also does a lot of debuffing, especially against a back row heavy comp. So in an ideal scenario, Valarr would mark the back row with Executioner mark, proc the mark on someone by killing them with his A2 in the next turn. And that will in turn debuffing other attack heroes in the back row that typically have high attacks. Because of his passive allows him to empower his team and cripple his opponent, it's unwise to really ignore him in a fight. However, his Thrust 3 passive can act to dissuade attackers worried about the stun. And lastly, due to so much of Valarr's effectiveness being in his Executioner passive, which itself is tied to Garth's Command passive, he is incredibly strong when paired with Garth, but only mediocre without. So with that being said, let's take a quick look at Garth's Command passive. So if we look at the passive of Garth, it's got the 3 components, right? The Protect 3, the Breath of Mana, and the last one being Command. So what Command does is it grants allies with lower maximum health than Garth with the Command mark and increases defense and health by 20%. And this works really well in combination with other frontline champions that have high health and high defense, which Valarr fits into that role. But with that being said, let's take a look at the Fate Core of Valarr and how that impacts his gameplay.
Right. So Fate Core Valarr has 2 changes that make him distinct from the regular version. And the first is a change to his passive, which gives him Barrier of Will. When 70% or more of his maximum health is taken at once, he gains 50% reduced damage taken for 2 turns, including the turn where he took that 70% damage. Then in the following 3 turns, damage received will be increased by 30%. He also has a new passive, Shackles, which is activated if targets with the Executioner mark gain 5 or more mana. And what this does is it decreases the target's attack by 10% for every mana they have. Since this only activates above 5 mana, that's a minimum of 50% attack reduction, which is huge. However, the effect is removed if the target is hit with a skill. So what you could do here is you let one hero gain a lot of mana, preferably the biggest threat on their team, and you just don't attack them. So even if they do use their heavy hitting abilities, their attack scaling is reduced by half. Another thing to mention is his A1 Demon Slash, or in this case her, deals 60% damage to all back row enemies. So it deals significantly less than 1/3 of the original damage, and there's no extra passive to make up for it. So Demon Slash is a lot weaker damage-wise, but he could potentially make up for it with the Barrier of Will and Shackles debuff passive. Now, you might remember us introducing Valarr as the second of the 5 greatest generals. Now, if you watched our Garf overview, which I recommend doing, you'll know that Garf is the first. The fact that Valarr needs the command mark in order to use his own Executioner passive, we felt that was an interesting lore tie-in to highlight his inferiority, as if he needed more things to be upset about. That's it for us today. If you have a different take on Valarr, please let us know in the comments below. And to see more reviews of Exo Heroes, feel free to check out our other content. If you like this video, please don't forget to like and subscribe, and I'll see you guys next time.
All right, see you guys.